It happened again last night.
Jenny slumped on the couch in her therapist's office.
And the night before that.
Wes shifted in his own leather chair. You're still having nightmares?
Every night this week. They're so creepy. I don't feel rested at all when I finally scream myself awake. Where do dreams come from?
The common theory is that dreams are a way for our minds to process the day's events. Have you been consuming any horror-related content recently?
Well, I guess I have been watching the news.
Jenny squirmed.
There are so many terrible things happening in the world every day.
Well, perhaps by dissecting your nightmare, we can figure out what anxieties your subconscious is trying to confront. Would you feel comfortable telling me about it? Jenny thought back to the cold night in January when the terrors had begun. The fright left such an impression as to cement the date in her mind. The situation was unfair. Why should her pleasant dreams flit away forgotten like the quiet days of summer, while these wretched visions lingered to haunt her waking hours? The story was always the same, though the cast changed with each passing night. Even Jenny played a different role in those imagined charades. Once, she was a lonely man working in a tall office building. In another, she was pregnant with her first child. No matter who the protagonist was, their fate was sealed the moment Jenny closed her eyes to sleep. There was always a chase. Through darkened halls or alleyways, the pursuer closed in on their prey. Once she was stabbed, mangled, eaten, or impaled, Jenny would awaken, screaming and cold with sweat. In her most recent ephemeral flight, she found herself in the body of an old man. His joints cried out in pain with every movement she made. Jenny tumbled the clumsy body through an empty nursing home as a being of exposed muscle plodded in pursuit. Bloody sinew slathered against the tile floor with each encroaching step. It held aloft 5 sinuous digits, then pointed. Jenny felt the old man stiffen. Pain shot through her wrists. The back of her hands burned. With slow, horrendous rips, the tendons attached to her fingers tore themselves away, leaving shreds of loose skin dangling in their wake. The snake-like tendons rose up. They wormed around her throat and began to constrict. With the rest of her arms limp and unusable, all she could do was sink to the floor and gasp for air. It sounds like the recurring theme is anxiety, or your own body betraying you. I know we all want to stay informed, but maybe try giving the news a break for now. Try to focus on positive content for a little while and see if that helps. If it doesn't, I can tell you a bit about lucid dreaming next time. There's no scientific basis for it, but some people claim to be able to do it. Jenny tacitly agreed, scanned the QR code to pay for her session, and left. Wes fell back in his chair once she was gone. He was reaching the limits of what he could do to help as a counselor. If the nightmares continued much longer, it was time to recommend a specialist. Still, the detailed depictions of such grisly deaths made him shudder. The human mind can be truly terrifying. Later that night, Wes sat patiently on the number 15 bus. The lighted windows of downtown passed by slowly as he listened to the conversations happening around him. 2 nurses sitting in the seats adjacent were departing from their shift. One of them mentioned an experience that gave him pause. As she told it, there had been a patient at the care center where she worked. In the middle of the night, he chewed through the tendons on the back of his hands, only stopping when he began to choke on the blood. Wes listened closely over the sounds of passengers boarding. It had to be a coincidence, but the similarities were uncanny. Through more eavesdropping, he learned that the man was asleep when the act occurred. Sitting at home, with the cold glow of a laptop illuminating the wall behind him, he began to look deeper into the nightmares Ginny had described over the last few weeks. The idea was absurd, but just as he was about to give up, he stumbled upon a news article which bore an uncanny resemblance to the one in her dreams. The story detailed events concerning a man in his early 30s, single, and working late in an office building. Security footage showed him falling asleep at his desk. Then, without waking, he stood and began to wander the halls. Confused meandering quickly transitioned into panicked flight until he came to the balcony above the main entrance to the building. There, he turned his back to the railing, lifted himself up, and tumbled headfirst to the tiles 5 floors below. Wes glanced out of his small apartment window to the lighted city beyond. 2 matching accounts wasn't a pattern. Not yet. Still, it awakened some primal fear in the pit of his stomach. There had to be a rational explanation. How long ago was the incident with the elderly patient? If it had happened earlier in the week, there was a chance Ginny had learned about it. Perhaps she absorbed the information subconsciously while overhearing someone else discuss the topic. The man in the office building had fallen more than a week ago, and the story was already on social media and the local news. He considered sharing this information with her as proof that these nightmares were merely the result of a mind processing tragic events. Small hairs prickled on the back of his neck, and he decided against it. Instead, Wes closed his laptop and shuffled anxiously off to bed. Sleep came on slowly. The air in his room felt oppressively heavy. The sheets were too hot one minute, then too cold the next. He rolled from one side to the other, desperate to stop thinking. In surrender, he lay still and glared at the empty ceiling. Creaking footsteps echoed heavy from the unit 1 floor above. Then they grew louder, into massive stomps that shook the walls, causing motes of dust to fleck down onto Wes's face. He tried to shout, to tell them to knock it off, but no sound escaped his lips. He screamed frantically, but still nothing came. The slamming grew louder. It was no longer stomps. These were the flaccid thuds of corpses hitting the floor, limp and decaying. Blood began to pool in a dark mass over his bed. Warm drops rained onto him as the pile above grew heavier. Large cracks formed in the drywall, and through them crawled a multitude of maggots and centipedes. They fell like drool from a warm mouth across Wes, and he was powerless to flee. The weight of so many bodies was sure to crush him. Limbs began to dangle through the ever-widening cracks, their fingers composed of rotting flesh and bones. Each in turn pointed accusingly at Wes. "What do you want from me?" he finally screamed. As if in surprise, the hands fell loose. Then, with ferocity, they began to rip away the last of the ceiling. Wes rolled away and scrambled to the door, just as the mass of blackened rock tumbled down, crushing his bed. The corpses gathered themselves up clumsily to begin the chase. Wes grabbed the keys from his kitchen, zipped out the front, and locked it behind him. The apartment hallway was quiet. He stood alone, in nothing but a pair of shorts. The door was heavy, designed for break-ins. There was a chance it could hold. A cold sensation wrapped itself around the bottom of his feet. Blood was burbling from the crack at the bottom of the door. Something was watching him through the peephole. As quickly as the feeling invaded his psyche, the door burst open. He had no choice but to stumble right and keep moving. He ran to the stairwell at the end of the hall, but to his dismay, the stairs only went up. The floor was a solid slab of concrete. From behind, he could hear the slathering horde of rotted corpses cascading its way toward him. "Jenny!" Wes shouted as he ascended. "I know this is one of your nightmares. I found the others. The people you described to me were real too. You need to wake up." The building seemed impossibly high. There were no other doors in the stairwell. His only option was the rooftop. "Remember when I told you about lucid dreaming? You are in control. That's why I'm able to speak right now. Please wake up." Wes slammed through the door at the top of the stairs. Skyscrapers cluttered the darkened city, their windows like stars in the inky black. On the horizon, the sun was rising new and red. The metal door swung open once more, and a flood of creeping corpses crawled into the cold, thin air. They quickly filled the roof, leaving Wes with little room to stand. "I can help you. I can make you see that there's nothing to be afraid of." Wes climbed onto the edge of the roof. "In a dream, you can do anything. You can even fly." With that, he stepped off and soared into the golden morning. Ginny awoke, sitting up fast and throwing off her heavy blankets. She clumsily reached for her phone, then hesitated. It was just another nightmare after all. You can't call up your therapist on a random Friday morning and ask if he's okay just because you had a dream about him. That's what she told herself as she got ready for work. Still, the idea lingered. Later, at the bus stop, she sent him a vague message about wanting to schedule another appointment. If Wes responded, it would confirm that she was just being foolish. The day went on as usual, but when she checked her phone again at lunch, there were no notifications. Jenny paced anxiously through the rest of her shift. Back home, after work, she gave in and called his office. The receptionist was distraught. According to her, early that morning, Wes had jumped from the top of his apartment building. Jenny sat numb on the kitchen floor as she listened. It was true. What he had told her in the dream was real. Days went by, and she refused to sleep again. Eventually, she learned that Wes was seen on security cameras. He was sleepwalking and calling out to her as he ran up the stairs. Her mental state deteriorated from then on. She was fired. Her days and nights became a blur of caffeine, until at long last there came a night when her body betrayed her and she fell asleep once more. The thing that chased her then, as it had chased so many victims before, took on the form of Wes, mangled and fragmented. With a crooked, accusing finger, he pointed to her. Inspecting the body she inhabited, Jenny realized in solemn horror that for the first time in her terrible dreaming, she was herself. Filled with remorse and tired of the endless ordeal, she slumped quietly on the ground. A thin whisper rattled from the creature. "In a dream, you can do anything." Jenny awoke with the sunrise, and the nightmares never returned.